surprise in Arizona. Hope you're all having a super fantastic sparkling day. Welcome to Before the Dirt Nap podcast number 1950, Words of the Past. So you're probably, what words do you mean? Well, I read an interesting article today about the word in-laws. When you see in-laws written on some of the older documents and things, it doesn't exactly mean what it does today. Because when you think of in-laws, you're thinking of your spouse's family. So, like if for my in-laws, I'm thinking of my husband's family. It didn't mean that back in the day. Back in the day, it actually meant in-laws as in a step parent. So if your mother had been remarried, the stepfather was known as an in-law, and the same with stepchildren. They were known as in-laws. So any step parent or stepchildren would be listed as in-laws. So I thought that was really cool. So they got me thinking, got the old brain thinking, what other words are used in genealogy back in the day? Like we're talking 1800s into the early 1900s, even sometimes later into the mid 1800s. What words were used before then that mean something different today or don't even get used at all today? So are you ready? We're going to go explore this now. So like we said, in-laws could refer to a step-parent or a step-sibling created through marriage. Today, it refers to the relatives gained through marriage, such as a spouse's partner or siblings. Very, very simple. The other one is master. This is usually referred to the head of a household, an employer, or someone highly skilled in a trade. And now it's used to indicate expertise in a field or an academic degree. So you've gone from being the master of the house, was the head of the household. Today, you've just got, we don't use that term master of the house these days. Or, the employer was known as the master or someone highly skilled in a trade. Today, it's more of an expertise in a field or an academic degree. Servant. Back then included household help, laborers, or apprentices, regardless of their social status. Today, it often refers to hired help in a domestic or professional setting, but less commonly used. Clerk. Think of the clerk. Think about that word. What does clerk usually mean to you? In the past, it could be a scholar or someone in minor holy orders, often tied to the church. Today, it refers to someone who works in administration or retail role. You have the store clerk, you have the admin clerk. So think about those. Esquire. I love the word Esquire. It's a really good magazine. I've had a browse through there's some really good articles in the Esquire magazine. Originally denoted as a social rank below a knight in England. So if you're below the rank of a knight in England in the social rankings, you're an esquire. Now it's used as an honorary title for lawyers in the United States or as a formal address in correspondence. Widow's portion. Then it referred to the share of a deceased husband's estate legally designated for the widow. Today, it is rarely used as inheritance laws have modernized. Poor, as in P-O-O-R, often used in records to describe someone receiving parish or community assistance, not always an indicator of destitution. Now a general term describing someone with limited financial means. Adopted. Then it could mean someone informally taken in by a family, not necessarily through legal adoption. Now it refers to a formal legal process of becoming part of a new family. Spinster. I didn't really like this one. When I first heard the word spinster, I thought it was somebody that would sit at a spinning wheel and was spinning the yarn. Yeah. It indicated an unmarried woman, often one who supported herself through work like spinning. But they had their own means of making their own money as well. Today, it's considered outdated and it's considered outdated. We just don't use it. Illegitimate, then used in official records to label children born out of wedlock with significant social and legal consequences. It is rarely used today due to its stigma. Today, they prefer non-marital birth. Pensioner. Back then, often referred to as a retired military person receiving a pension. Now it refers to anyone receiving a retirement income, but regardless of the profession. Foster child. Back then, a child temporarily taken in by a family, not always under a legal arrangement. Now it refers to children placed with a family through a formal foster care system. Begotten. I love that word, begotten. Used in baptismal or family records to indicate parentage. Now rarely used outside of religious or poetic contexts. A freeholder. Denoted someone who owned land outright and had voting rights. Today, it still means land ownership, but without political implications. I know in New Zealand, we've got the option of buying a house that's on freehold land or a house that's on cross-leased land or leased land. So freeholders means that you can own the land outright that your house is on. If it's cross-leased or leased, you've got a small rental to pay, and it's usually for like 99 years or something like that. Let's see, lodger. Back then, it was a person living in someone's home and paying rent, sometimes a relative or close family friend. Now it refers strictly to a tenant with no familiar ties. Charity, this is an interesting one, referred to an organization relief for the poor, often linked to religious institutions. Now it's a broader term for organizations or acts of philanthropy. Philanthropy, yeah. Dower. This is, back then, it was a portion of a deceased husband's property that his wife was entitled to for her lifetime. And now it is rarely used in modern legal contexts. Gentlewoman. Then it was a woman of good birth or social standing. Now it is archaic with little use in contemporary language. Alien. Oh, there are so many contexts for this one. Back then, it referred to a non-citizen or foreigner, particularly in legal contexts. Now, it still refers to a non-citizen, but can carry broader implications depending on the context. Orphan court. Orphan, as in so back then, it was a court that dealt with the guardianship, wills, and estates for children without parents. Now it's referred to as probate court in many jurisdictions. So with guardianships and wills and estates, this is if both parents were deceased, what happened with the children? Who was going to be their guardian? What was it? What happened to their estate and things like that? And now we refer to that as probate court. Militia. Back then, local armed forces made up of civilians often called upon for short-term military service. Now it can refer to an organized paramilitary group or reserve military forces. So my question for you today is, have you come across a term in your family history research that made you stop and ask, what did they mean by that? Did they have a word? Maybe it's one of the words we've covered today. Let's see, you've got a marriage contract was another one. In the past was a legal agreement involving families, often with terms regarding property, inheritance, and alliances. In present day, it's a term primarily understood in relation to prenuptial agreements or formalized unions. Let's see. Let's see if I've got any other words on my list that I haven't covered today. Okay, so cousin, but in the past usually used broadly for any relative or kin, not necessarily the child of an aunt or uncle. Today, it refers specifically to the child of one's aunt or uncle. I know, they come up with some crazy terms and things. Let's see, what else do we got in there? Niece or nephew, in the past sometimes used for grandchildren or more distant younger relatives. Present, it refers only to the children of one's siblings. So you can see how some terms have changed over time. Aunt or uncle, in the past, it could mean an elderly relative or a person in position of authority within an extended family. And present usually specifically refers to the siblings of one's parents or their spouses. I've also seen aunt and uncle used with close family friends of the parents, where they have basically, when you have that lifelong friend that is almost like a sibling to you, then your children may call them aunt or uncle as well. So I've seen that because that person's like a sibling. Widow and widower in the past also referred to someone who had been left by a spouse, divorced, or separated. Present refers specifically to someone whose spouse has died. Now, that was one I did not know until I came across and I thought, oh, that's interesting. Because sometimes when you're on the census reports, you see M for married and W, meaning which widow. And now I'm sort of like thinking, oh, maybe the widow in the census report doesn't mean that their spouse died, but they were divorced or separated. So now I'm going to be going back through some of the records that I've looked at and going, okay, can I find their spouse somewhere else and find out if they were divorced or separated or dead? When did it switch from being divorced or separated to being dead? So now I'm going to be going back through some of my research to find out what the W mean. And one of the ways that we can do that is if we go into the enumerators for every census, every single US and federal census, for the federal census, well, basically for any census, there was an enumerator's handbook. And the enumerator's handbook told them exactly what they had to put in each column across the page, and also the marital status as well. So I'm going to go back and have a look at the marital status to see when it switched from being divorced or separated to being dead for the spouse, if they were a W for marital status. So I'm curious to go see that one, because when I saw that today when I was looking through things for past terms and all of that, I thought, oh, yes. So all of those ones that I thought were, because that I've put that they died between, 1940 and 1950. No, hang on, going back. When did they start doing the relationships? 1870, I think it was, 1870 to 1830. And I've got they died somewhere during that, the spouse died somewhere during that time because the person has a W next to their name. Maybe I need to go back and see if they were on the census somewhere else, because maybe they were actually divorced or separated. But then, because it often makes me wonder, because a lot of people back in the day, if they were divorced or separated, they moved to another town and told people that their spouse had died so that they didn't have that stigma of being divorced or separated. So, and that's when they said they were widowed because their spouse had died. So now I've got to go research the word widow to see when it changed from being divorced or separated to being dead. I'll keep you posted on that one. But that's all I've got for you today. Go out, have a super fantastic sparkling evening, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow evening at 6 p.m.